Hello, it's Fred and Sheila McCoy at the Hatfield McCoy Museum in Liberty, Kentucky. FredMcCoy.com or Hatfield's McCoy's Museum.com. This is going to be another segment of Keeping It Real. And Keeping It Real is where we have been told something, somebody said something, we've seen something, read something, and we're going to correct it. There must have been something wrong with it because we're having a Keeping It Real segment, so that means we're going to correct something. It's up to you. We'll try to show proof whenever we can and so forth on things like that. It's up to you to believe what you want. You can continue to believe whatever it is we're correcting, or you may tend to believe what we're telling you. But some of this stuff is so minute that some people it won't amount to a bag of beans. Only to a real Hatfield McCoy historian or follower or groupie or whatever you want to call it would it really matter some of these little minute things. But to us,
well, it does matter to the families or whatever, because when it's written wrong or misstated, then and it's not corrected, that's what's going to go on from now till someone corrects it or whatever.
And that's what's going on for years. Really, that's true. That's how where we're at today, because there's so many misconceptions. Getting on with the Keeping It Real. Sometimes we started out, we wasn't going to name people. Then we started naming people, and then we said, well, let's don't. But on this one right here, this was on the internet, and it's under Explore Kentucky, Explore kyhistory.ky.gov. So I imagine it's some kind of a government, some kind of a historical society or something. And but I found this on the internet, and I thought it was interesting. It's historical marker 2434 is dedicated to Frank and Nancy McCoy Phillips. Now Sheila will put this on
at the end of the video.
At the end, or she'll show it up real close here in a minute where you can see it. I've yelled in some stuff here where we can follow along, but it says that the bad Frank Phillips was appointed to the Kentucky governor to arrest members of the Hatfield family. Phillips' appointment followed the resumption of violence in the long dormant feud. Now, it's not really what we're going to discuss today, but we'll talk about that for 1 second. In a lot of books, well, not a lot of books, there's a couple of books where the author says that the feud was dormant for 5 years. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened. Randall McCoy started it back. Well, Randall McCoy never let it go. Randall McCoy lost 3 children tied up naked to 3 trees and shot dead. One of them completely innocent from anything. They got the wrong boy. We've covered that in another video.
They've lost their home. It was set fire to.
So the feud, at that time, it was not dormant. Right. In fact, there's court records that we've got in our book where Uriah McCoy, my great-great-grandfather, Uriah McCoy was arrested and charged with wanton endangerment or firing a gun into a crowd or whatever. So was Lark McCoy, arrest records. There's charges for Nancy McCoy, different ones, carrying concealed weapons. And so the feud was not dormant. The feud, the hatred and the anger was still there. You had, Ellison had been killed, and you had the 3 McCoy boys killed, but you couldn't go to West Virginia to get them at that point. And Randall McCoy, if he'd known that was going to happen, he would have tried to have done something when they were being held in the schoolhouse at One. But he didn't. Who expected somebody to go out and just tie 3 boys to a tree and shoot them, assassinate them? But Randall McCoy, and anybody tells you this, even some of the Hatfields, West Virginia Hatfields, would go along, and he was a law-abiding citizen. He was trying to use the law. Go through the system. And even though they say it was dormant for 5 years, no, it took 5 years to keep trying to get something done, to keep getting the charges. Now, these guys were indicted and charged after it happened. They just couldn't bring them to justice. They were hiding in caves in West Virginia, like Cotton Top and Alex Messer and some of them says they were sleeping with their Winchesters with their boots on. So the feud was not dormant. It just hasn't come to the point of where Randall McCoy was getting any legal assistance from the justice system at the time. It occurred after McCoy's supporters, including Perry Cline, convinced Governor Simon Buckner to offer rewards for the arrest of William Devil Anse Hatfield and other members of the Hatfield clan who had been indicted for the murders 5 years earlier in the Paw Paw Tree incident, described in marker 2047. Now, these historical markers evidently have numbers on them that you can look at, and they're telling you where that story is at on that historical marker. Now, they're saying there that the feud was brought back alive after McCoy's supporters and Perry Cline convinced the governor to put a reward out for Devil Anse Hatfield. When Simon Buckner became the governor of Kentucky, the newspaper articles, the Hatfields and McCoys had made history in '82 from the election grounds and stabbing of Ellison and the 3 McCoy boys being assassinated. This wasn't any new news. It was just that there was a governor there that was going to try to bring justice to the Randall McCoy's family. He signed the warrant for Devil Anse to extradite Devil Anse back, and he also put the $500 reward on it. If I ain't mistaken, could be mistaken, so I'll put that word in there, but I think there was a $500 reward on Cap Hatfield also. But we know there was a reward on Devil Anse because we have got the only known original warrant back there in that case. And a good time to bring this point up. How did we get this original warrant and other things that we've come up with? On one of these videos, we're discussing the monument. I know we go from thing.
We jump around.
We jump around, but it's okay. If you're interested, you'll enjoy it when we get to the point of the point I'm going to make. But over on the other side, in the other building, we have the boards, and we have the one showing Devil Anse's funeral, the expense that was paid for his funeral. And we hadn't really thought about covering it until somebody mentioned it to us. Where did you get Devil Anse's funeral receipt? And that is a great question. That funeral receipt, if you'll remember, it was paid in full at the bottom, and it was signed by Tennis Hatfield. Tennis Hatfield was Devil Anse Hatfield's youngest son. Tennis Hatfield was the father of Handsome Jack Hatfield. Handsome Jack Hatfield was the father of Stephen Hatfield. Stephen Hatfield and Debbie, his wife, were friends of Sheila's and mine. Stephen Hatfield was the great-grandson of Devil Anse Hatfield. His grandfather was Tennis Hatfield. I'm way off story here, but I'm going to finish this topic. Tennis Hatfield, years later, after Devil Anse and Levacy had died, he inherited the home place. And he got in hard shape financially. This is according to Stephen, and it's according to a lot of newspaper articles and stories that's been told throughout. But I got it firsthand from Stephen Hatfield, so I have no reason to doubt him. Stephen says that Tennis got in a hard spot, and he set fire to the house for the insurance purposes. In fact, down the road, he served time. He got caught for it and actually served some time for that. Stephen says that before Tennis set fire to that house, he had taken everything in that house that was valuable, or anything that belonged to his dad and mother, Levacy and Devil Anse, and put it in the barn. And that's how Stephen ended up with a lot of the stuff that we now have in our museum. He got it from his father, Jack. Tennis had given it to Jack. Jack handed it down to Stephen, and we got it from Stephen. It's a long story, and all this and that sad story. The outcome of Stephen had a son. He's got a daughter still living, but they also had a son, Michael. And but anyway, that paper that's in there, and that's the only one that I know of that exists, that we know of. And, you know, there may be another one. The thing about it is, when people says that they have this stuff, because things are so easily photoshopped and copied and so forth, and that's what we like to do, is track it down and see exactly where it came from and see the history on it. But that's the only one that we know of the funeral receipt for Devil Anse Hatfield. Now, since we posted it in our book years ago, since we posted it on our Barry's Facebook page, Hatfield McCoy Facebook page, it's all over the place. You see that everywhere. But to our knowledge, the first time that was ever copied and put on the internet is from us. And we got that from Stephen Hatfield in a whole big box full of stuff, letters, all kinds of different personal things that only Devil Anse or Tennis or Stephen, somebody like that would have in the Hatfield family. So that's where that came from. So that's also the warrant back here. Now the warrant, Stephen, he passed away. He had it up for sale.
Yeah.
He passed away. His wife, Debbie, sold it. She passed away about 6 months after he did. And we tracked down the gentleman and his wife that bought it, and we purchased it from him.
Right.
And it's now in our collection in the museum. So that's where those two documents came from, would have been Tennis Hatfield originally. Now, back to the warrant. Remember that Governor Buckner had sent word to Willis Wilson, West Virginia's 7th governor, that he had warrants on Devil Anse, one of them brought back. And Devil Anse decided, let's kill all the McCoys, and that's where that story came up. So this is not something, the way they're making it sound here, makes it sound like, looks like they just left good enough alone. They shouldn't have pursued Devil Anse. They shouldn't have pursued the rest of those 20-some people that shot the 3 McCoy boys. And that's
hard to take. I mean, with anybody, if you lose a child or a loved one, you want justice.
You want justice.
So,
and,
I don't blame you.
But according to the story here, the McCoys wouldn't leave it alone, and so they pursued it. The prospect of a reward enticed men across the Tug River into West Virginia in pursuit of the Hatfields, with Phillips leading the group of McCoys and allies. The battle ensuing, Battle of Grapevine, led to the capture of 8 Hatfields who were charged, tried, convicted in Pike County for the parts they played in the feud. Trial covered by marker number 1866. I've still not got to where we're going to with this, but let's correct this while we're at it. It says that the prospect of the reward offered by Governor Buckner, $500, enticed men to go into West Virginia and bring back the Hatfields. Well, the Hatfields wasn't brought back till 1888 after the cabin burning. So did the reward entice them, or did the Hatfields, West Virginia Hatfields, that came across the river and killed 2 more of Randall's children, beat his wife and left her for dead, and burned his cabin, did that intrigue or enrage?
Yeah, I'm sure it got a lot of people upset because Sally was beat to an inch of her life.
The Kentucky residents didn't like West Virginia coming over here and doing that to the family. And like we've said from the beginning, at one time it was Kentucky against West Virginia. Kentucky, Hatfields and McCoys, West Virginia, Hatfields and McCoys. So, once again, it had nothing to do with the reward. It had to do with justice. It had to do with Frank Phillips. The reason Frank Phillips led, because Frank Phillips was there the next morning and actually saw Alifair and Calvin, the aftermath, and they were froze to the ground. The blood and everything, they had frozen to the ground, not counting Sally being beat within an inch of her life. So, had nothing to do with the $500 reward at that point because they were after justice. Interestingly, Frank's strongest, now here's what this is about. Here's where we're correct in history for sure. Frank's strongest lasting connection to the McCoy clan came through his wife.
Nancy McCoy, and this is what they say, who was the daughter of Randall and Sarah McCoy. Nancy's first husband was John Hatfield.
So in this, again, this is explore kyhistory.ky.gov.
Right.
So this is some kind of a government, I'll tell you what, I know it is because I looked it up a while ago on my phone. I've seen that on the internet the other night. Mm-hmm. And so when you go on there, you've got to go, and that's what it looks like.
I'll also get a little bit closer there so they can see. Over this way. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And you've got to go to the main bottom. And when you go to the main bottom, it says search. And we're going to search Frank Phillips. And when Frank and Nancy comes up,
on marker 2176.
There he is. Frank and Nancy Phillips. So you're going to go to that and you're going to start reading there some of the stuff that we've just read, and you're going to read on down. Oh crap, I should have been better prepared, but
That's all right.
oh, I know what you got to do. You got to click on Frank and Nancy. It's good.
Yeah.
I'm showing you this. That way you'll know how to get there. And that way you know that Sheila and I are not blowing smoke. Governor Sam Buckner, the Battle of Grapevine. Interestingly enough, Frank's strong, lasting connection to the McCoy clan came through his wife, Nancy McCoy, who was the daughter of Randall and Sarah McCoy.
That is definitely not
And
right.
that
That's
is
wrong.
what we are correcting. There's that. If you can stop your camera or your TV and read that. But better yet, just go to the site so you'll see firsthand what we're saying. And that's why we're correcting and have these little segments of keeping it real.
Nancy was a daughter to Asa Herman McCoy,
Exactly.
not Randall.
And Roseanne was the daughter of Randall and Sarah. But somewhere along the way, ever who wrote this article for this Kentucky historical people didn't care enough about making sure it was correct. They was just wanting to put something out there on the internet or on a sign. And that's where our history and the Hatfield-McCoy feud history is so
twisted
screwed up. Now, I'm almost done, or we are, but they both died young. Frank was shot to death in a fight at the age of 36 in 1898, while Nancy passed away from tuberculosis 3 years later. Now let's talk about Frank was shot to death in a gunfight. That's incorrect. Frank was actually shot by his friend who once was on his posse chasing down the West Virginia Hatfields. He was shot in the leg. Mm-hmm. The guy wasn't even trying to kill Frank. They just got mad at each other. They were at it. He shot Frank trying to slow him down or show him he meant business. And Frank ended up getting gangrene in his leg. They cut his leg off. He still ended up dying. Mm-hmm. So he didn't die in a gunfight, and he didn't die immediately. He lingered for several days.
That's why you see a picture of Frank's leg buried there next to him. It's because they had taken his leg off and then it still didn't.
They buried it so many days or a week before they buried him.
Yeah.
And they'd made a little grave. Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Nancy. Nancy passed away from tuberculosis 3 years later. Okay? Let's talk about that. Perry Klein passed away of tuberculosis. Wall Hatfield passed away of tuberculosis in prison. Sarah Elizabeth passed away of tuberculosis, measles. Rosanna passed away of tuberculosis. There's one book that said Rosanna had gonorrhea. And that's how people have done throughout the years. And the stories they have told, it's just so outrageous and so slanderous on either family, on both families. There's actually been some stories. I know it don't seem like I take up for the Hatfields. Again, I'm half Hatfield, so if I haven't got to them yet, I'm really just covering the ones that's
out there that's really, really, really incorrect.
Yeah, and those are the ones on devil ants. I mean, those are just they need to be corrected. And when we get done with them, there'll be plenty to go around and share some other ones. What my point is here, the major cause of death back in the 1800s and during that time was
pneumonia.
Pneumonia. The number one cause of death during those times was pneumonia. People froze to death in the winter times. Can you imagine getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning instead of strolling into the commode and taking a leak? You have to go outside on the porch, or you have to go outside to an outhouse. I don't know, probably not. Everybody's millennials today, it seems like to me, and none of them's got any sense. I'll just be honest. Well, I'm telling you, our country's lost its way. But can you, and I've lost my
train of thought
when you said that.
You're talking about going outside, how people had pneumonia.
So they had to go outside and use the bathroom, and they got sick and they got pneumonia. Now my question here is, I don't care if it's Wall Hatfield, because they said Wall died of pneumonia, starving himself to death, tuberculosis.
Yep.
Where's the death certificates? Where's the death certificates at on these people where it says died of tuberculosis? On Hatfields or McCoys, where are the death certificates? And that's what Sheila and I, sometimes we put out these challenges just to see if people can find this stuff, because we can't, we haven't, and it may be out there. Maybe we just didn't look in the right place or look long enough or we do the same thing where we're investigating. We can go look at microfilm or court records, and we'll be looking for one thing specifically, and we'll get in a courthouse, and all of a sudden, one of us will find something else. Say, look here.
Look what we found.
Where'd you find that at? Let's follow that. And we'll start following these leads, and we forget what we went there for. Get home and start looking over that story, and we say, that ain't even what we went for.
We found this and wasn't even looking for it.
And that's the history of the Hatfields and McCoys. It is enjoyable. We're history buffs. We're history buffs. We don't care what kind of history it is, Civil War or whatever, but the Hatfields and McCoys, where we've got a personal relationship to it.
Personal connection.
Yeah. And it's become part of our lives, most of our lives.
Right.
And this was another segment. I know we drifted off many a times. We're starting to feel more comfortable now.
We're getting there.
In front of the camera. And we're drifting off, but hopefully even when we drift off, there may be something in that conversation like the warrant or the funeral record, how we come up with that. We didn't even cover that.
Right.
When we're covering that board on Devil Ance's monument. And I know this is the last thing, I'm getting ready to be done. But on that board in there, let me just show you something real fast. Sorry, babe.
Right there, you got it.
We're going to go through here, and it's easier to show you on the board than it is to tell you, and that way you'll know where it's at. I'm always showing the
Turning around.
Oh, how you do it?
You'll have to rotate your whole thing this way.
Okay, go ahead and
There you go.
I wish I would have done that coming through.
I can stop that if you want.
And start back up from here. Okay, right here's what I'm going to show. We're always showing these two graves of Johnsy and Devil Ants. Right over here in this picture, look at that picture there. That is actually Johnsy's funeral that I forgot to point out when we was making this. I forgot to point out. That right there is actually Johnsy's grave. They're standing on Devil Ants Hatfield's grave from a year 14 months prior. This is Johnsy's grave. There's no mistaking it. And there is that monument in the background. And that is the last thing. How do you turn it back around, babe? Or do you want to?
Tighten it down there. Or did you loosen it?
Yeah, I loosened it.
Yeah,
Just turn it around.
Yep.
All right.
There you go.
There you go. You can tell it. Keeping it real.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. And have a great evening. Come and see us at
another segment of
Keeping It Real.
All right.
Bye.